Hello, everybody. It's Matt
Mike.
doing the IronTrap podcast. This week is our visual podcast.
Yes.
So if you're listening,
All the great visuals
Yeah,
shooting across the
yeah.
screen.
Yeah, so if you laser beams and moon dogs.
Yes.
So if there is, if you're listening on the audio format only, and these ones Mike edits together some visual, some clips from old videos and things like that he puts up that makes them pretty interesting. So if you want to watch it also, head on over to our YouTube channel and you can watch it. Or just listen and we'll try and paint the picture with our words.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
So before we get into it, I'll just add that Black Friday's coming up. We're doing a 15% off sale store-wide on IronTrapGarage.com. Merch, parts, everything. I have a huge truckload of merch I need to go pick up next week. So if we've been out of stock for a while of some stuff, it'll all be back in stock. Calendars will be up on the website as well. They'll be delivered in the next week or so. And Matt and I have been talking about potentially doing a pre-order for our first shirt that we ever made, the Ride With Us shirt. We talked about it in our audio podcast last week. But I think we're going to do a pre-order for the Black Friday sale. So if you're wanting to get one of those shirts, it'll be a pre-order, which means you place an order for the shirt and we will have the shirts printed and you'll receive them probably in and around the first of the year of next year. It takes a little bit to print shirts. So don't email us 5 days after you do the pre-order wondering where the shirt's at. It'll take a little bit. But, yeah, I think that's about it for business stuff.
Business stuff. Yeah,
Try and get through it as quick and as painless as possible.
Yeah, you don't have to fast forward for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's why Mike did it this time and not me, because I'm long-winded. So today's topic is, so we've been doing in a handful of these audio ones or video ones, we've been doing a little bit of storytelling, and seems that people enjoy that, talking about some of our old videos that were popular, or some of, even in the past adventures we've gone on that weren't on video, discussing some of them. People seem to like the storytelling side of it. And so that's what we're going to do today. So the one, we could probably break this one into multiple podcasts, but we're going to...
we might do a second one and dive in a little deeper on some stuff. But
so this one is the Junkyard, Swamp Merc, Junkyard,
Forgotten Hot Rod,
Junkyard Extraction. It was also my birthday adventure.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
For it. So, basically, for anybody that isn't familiar, maybe you haven't been watching us for a super long time. Number of years ago, we went to a local modern junkyard that had a section that was closed to the public, that was all of the kind of forgotten old cars that the original owner had been...
Well, it was a junkyard for years, and they did...
Yeah, but this was all the old cars that were interesting he would put in a property next to it. So I don't think... I think when they bought the yard, it was already, I forget now, I wish I had done the research, but I think it was a junkyard for a very, very long time. But I think with the owner, the owner's sons I was dealing with, when their father bought the junkyard or took over, it was fully cleared out at that point.
Oh,
and he,
okay.
I don't know if it was the 60s or 70s, he kind of restarted the junkyard.
I think it was in the 60s, because that's like the Swamp Merc and the Forgotten Hot Rod had stickers.
Yeah, that's true. So it was, I think when I understand from them, I think when he bought the junkyard, it was already cleaned out for the most part.
Oh, okay.
And he was kind of starting fresh. But basically, local junkyard, and the gentleman had bought the neighboring property. It was a house with a backyard that kind of butted up against the junkyard property. And he started putting, his keeper, for lack of a better term, cars over there. So it was all the old cars or something that was interesting. He put it in the backyard, and he even had kind of I don't know if it was a fence, but it was like a hill that you couldn't get over there. Now, talking to some of our older friends in the area that, have been hunting old cars, everybody knew that stuff was there. It was just that you weren't really allowed to go in there, but people used to go to their junkyard and you could kind of look through the weeds and see a Mercury.
And none of it was for sale.
Yeah, nothing was apparently ever for sale. And from what we understand, like our friend Pete told us, that he remembers the swamp Merc when it got put in there when he first saw it, and it was like a pretty decent, like they drove it in there type car, or maybe the engine broke.
I think that was the story that we were told. It was like a family car. They were on vacation and the engine seized and it got junked and just parked there.
Yeah, so a lot of those cars that were in there had been in there since the 60s or 70s, and that area flooded. It became very much a swamp.
That's why it was called the Swamp Merc.
Yeah, so the stuff was pretty bad. Everything in there was pretty bad. But over the years, no one was able to buy anything. A lot of people tried to over the years. And through the power of social media, this all happened. So I don't recall exactly how it happened. So one of the guys that works there, this was back when he kind of was just starting out at the yard. He had taken some cool artsy photos of the cars, and he's into old cars, Robbie. And Rob, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but basically, I think he either messaged us or posted on our Instagram, and I looked at his page and saw some of the photos or something. I don't remember how, but there was some sort of lineage or connection where he also had sent the photos or told Mel about the Race of Gentlemen, Mel, about the cars, and through internet For You page or whatever, I saw the stuff. I think maybe he had commented on Mel's post, and then For You page showed me his profile, looked at it, something happened, I don't remember. But somehow I got on his profile, I started looking, I'm like, holy shit, this looks like the Junkyard, like down the road. Like I grew up like literally like 5 miles from the Junkyard, and I'm like, this looks like that yard and some of those cars. And then you start sleuthing, you're like, holy shit, that's that place.
Yeah.
So he and I started messaging, and I was kind of like, hey man, like I'd love to buy some of those cars. And he's like, well, actually I was trying to tell Mel and some different people about the cars because they're talking about getting rid of some of them or clearing the land out, and I want to see some of this stuff get saved. So he was just trying to like be proactive and try and get the word out to get some of this stuff saved. So I instantly latched on because we're so local, and so after a bunch of work, he took a bunch of photos and kind of some back and forth with the now owners, who were the two sons. He's like, okay, well, we'll figure out a time to go look at all this stuff. And it was probably, I don't know, it took quite a while. I don't remember.
We went in the fall to look at everything because there was no weeds, nothing. It was all dead.
Yeah, that's
It might have been early winter even.
And we were talking about it since like the winter before or something like that. I was talking with him about it.
I think it was the spring before because he's like, it's all grown up. There's a ton of vegetation. Yeah. Why don't we wait till the fall or the winter where everything's dead? You can see everything and walk around.
So he starts sending me the photos. And it's like, oh man, there's a 39 Ford sitting in the gravel outside of this area, and there's 39 Merc, and there's you could just see all the 35.6 pickup, and there's like a 41 pickup or something, or 46.8
Model T pickup.
Yeah, there's a bunch of like neat stuff, and like he just sent me all these photos. I'm like, oh my god, there's got to be great stuff hiding in here. So we eventually got to go over there and look at the stuff. But during this time period of me kind of trying to coordinate coming to look at the stuff, we started asking around some of the local, older friends that we trusted, what do they remember? What do they know? And they start telling us. And then some of the stuff I was hearing from some of the local older guys is like, oh, well, so the place is Chuck's Junkyard is the name, or Auto Salvage. I shouldn't say Junkyard because they don't like that term anymore, but Chuck's Auto Salvage. Chuck was kind of, like a lot of these salvage yards and junkyards, those guys were also like dirt racers, and they were involved, or drag racing or whatever. So his shop, the folklore goes, is that a bunch of the old dirt racers used to use his shop to fix up their dirt cars, like during the week or nights before the next race. So like apparently there was always old race cars and stock cars and different stuff there. So there was some folklore that he had a lot of the old like parts from the cars he would help these guys fix up, old broken race wheels, or the folklore got pretty grand. Like, there might be some roadster pieces or bodies in
There's
the
a
one.
pair of Arden heads in there.
Yeah, there was all kinds of folklore. So it's like, my mind's racing. So we coordinated some time to go look at the stuff, and apparently, leading up to us going to look at the stuff, Rob had said, yeah, one of the owners, the sons, said, yeah, there is some old racing stuff or old parts that are in one of the garages. They might be interested in selling some of it. They might send it all to auction. So we went and looked at everything, and the cars were bad.
Rough.
Bad. And I will say, this was earlier on in the channel when I was building the free tea and full of piss and vinegar. So I was like, I could fix all this stuff. I could fix anything. I have 100 lifetimes left. So we were like, oh, I'd love that one, blah, blah, blah. So the owner, it's a gnat flying around.
It was flying around my face earlier.
Get out of here. So the owners, they have 2 yards. One is the original yard that's near us, and they had another yard, I think, out in like the York area. So the 2 brothers kind of ran each building, or they were based out of each junkyard more frequently. So when we finally got the 2 of them together, because they're running very successful, large auto salvage yards, we finally got both of them in one place to ask the questions. What were the real stories? What was going on? And we started looking at all the cars, and it's like, let's put it frankly, they didn't give a shit about.
Yeah, this stuff was more of an inconvenience.
Now, they liked old cars. I'm not saying that they didn't appreciate the stuff, but they were all super rough, and they were kind of like, these guys are selling, millions of dollars in auto parts a year, and we come around kind of wasting their time to look at these junk cars that, as far as they were concerned, were just a nuisance. So
the original plan, what kind of started all of potentially selling them, is where all these cars were sitting. They were going to try and clear it out and put stone down to start. It's at its wasted space for the junkyard. They could, or salvage yard. Sorry, they could expand the salvage yard a great amount and use that for putting more cars to sell parts off of.
Yeah, so that was the idea. So they were trying to, and in the same breath, it was kind of a waste. Like, if you're looking at it from a business standpoint, the time it was going to take to pull these cars out and paying their employees to do it was going to be a losing proposition, because the money you're paying those guys, like the Rob that was our connection there, he was a dismantler at the time. So he was taking the salvage cars apart, and they would take the engine out and all the parts, and then they put them on the shelf. So when you call, the parts are already kind of ready to go. So every hour that he's helping to dig a car out of the field is an hour that he's not taking a car apart to make money. So they weren't super interested in, they wanted to get the stuff going, but they also weren't really interested in dealing with like 100 people. So they were talking about, like, maybe we'll pull 2 or 3 cars out at a time, put them out in the field in front of the building with a sign on them, and then the people could come into the normal office and deal with, the salespeople. So luckily we kind of got in there before that, and just with business things, it just didn't happen as they expected. So we got in there, looked around. I don't remember. Do you remember much about that?
The first day there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was wild. There was just, it was really neat because there was no greenery. So you could see everything really well. There was that 50 Olds that was sunken in the mud. It just looked badass. It looked like it was laid out and had like the perfect stance. And it was really neat because early in the channel, I hadn't experienced anything like that yet. Going to that kind of like hidden secret junkyard with just, and it was cool stuff from the 40s, 50s, and there was 60s and 70s stuff too. So it was a really neat experience for, I think that was 2018. So, I mean, we'd only been doing the channel like a year. So we hadn't done anything super wild yet.
Yeah. So when we went in there and started looking around, the photos I had seen, you always hope that the stuff's in better shape than it usually is. So the 39 Mercury, I was like, man, I'd love to have. I'd been building some hot rods, had the Pagoda City Coupe and stuff, so I was already immediately thinking about, building a custom would be killer. A 3940 Merc is, one of the best,
Yeah.
best platforms for that, as far as I'm concerned. And so I saw that, and I'm like already building the car in my head and what I want to do to it. And then we get there, and the car's like terrible,
Broken in half.
It's just terrible, and I'm like, oh no. And there was a 39 two-door sedan sitting next to it that was even worse. That was in the mud. Remember?
Oh yeah.
And we parted that out, but like.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so we looked at all the cars, and again, this goes back. Some of this podcast stuff is we get these questions of how much did you pay, how did you work the deal, that kind of stuff, and that's where we're kind of like pulling the curtain back. So we went and looked at all the cars. We talked about it in a previous podcast where when we make these deals, I'm thinking about what does the person that's selling the cars want? What are they looking for? They wanted easy, and they made a lot of money every day, so he was not bothered if we came there and were haggling over offering $150, whatever. These guys didn't care. They would just scrap them at that point because they were so rough. They didn't give a crap, or they'd let them sit there and rot until they felt like dealing with it. So we went there, and I realized that they also didn't want to remove one car. So if I wanted to pluck one car out of the field in the mud because the way they were packed, they weren't going to pull one car out and move 10 to get to it. So you had to kind of pick cars that were around the perimeter that was going to help them start cleaning the property up without a huge investment in time. So we started talking to them, and I kind of realized that like I needed to buy a bunch of cars because that was the only way that they were going to raise their eyebrows. So I really just wanted the Mercury and the Forgotten Hot Rod, the 39 two-door sedan, because those two were near the edges. They were the two coolest ones, in my opinion, there. So we started talking to them, and these cars are junk. A lot of them were pretty bad. They knew they were bad. I knew they were bad. So I think I offered $1,000 a car.
There was 4 cars you offered on.
I think I bought 5 or 6. There was the 32 BB.
Oh, I forgot about
Double
that.
B. That was near, and all these cars again. I was picking stuff that was going to help them get clear this space out. So the 39 two-door sedan was sitting actually in the gravel, not in the mud, because I guess it used to sit inside of one of the buildings. So that was sitting outside, kind of in the normal junkyard, salvage yard. So they could
Very much so.
They could have easily used that space for some racking by cleaning that area up. So there was that. There was the 32 Double B. There was the 39 two-door sedan that was really rough, that was right near the edge of the field. Get that net, bastard.
One of these times.
So was that 4, 3, 4. There was the Mercury, that's 5. And there was the 41 Ford
That's
that
right.
was on the other side that was near the edge also. So all these cars were kind of right around each other, and they were on the edges. I knew that they could just hook a chain with a machine and lift or drag them out of there. They just had to kind of clean some of the, the stuff out. So I offered $1,000 a piece, which I knew some of those cars were not worth $1,000. But I knew that if we just made it simple, because they walked out with us one time. After that, they were not bothered to go back out to the mud and look at these cars. So I just kind of was like, I'll give you $1,000 a car. I know that some of those cars aren't even worth $1,000. Let's just average it out. And I knew in my head that I could part out the cars we weren't going to use and kind of break even on those cars or make a small amount of money. But then in the end, I was going to get the Mercury and I was going to get the 39 two-door sedan, Forgotten Hot Rod, for basically free if I did all this right. So I was spending, I don't know, $5 or $6 grand, whatever.
And this is before we were even really making money from YouTube.
Yeah, we weren't making money. I was just buying and selling in parts myself while working at Eastwood to do all this. So yeah, it wasn't the operation we have now.
And our thought process wasn't, the 39 two-door sedan would be good video. We knew it would be good video content, but we weren't going into the mindset of we could make some money off of that video
Correct.
content
Yep.
to help pay for the car, which that car changed our mindset.
Yeah.
Helped change our mindset, but he was just going into it going, this would be cool stuff to buy and work on. I really want the 39 Merc to build
Yes.
one day.
Yep. So the other problem that we had was I didn't have the space, and this was during the time where my property was borderline junking.
This is peak junkyard.
Yeah, it was getting really bad at my property. I didn't have the equipment to move the stuff around. I had my old Ferguson tractor, but like it just wasn't set up very well, and I didn't have this. I didn't want to just drop 5 or 6 junk cars in my driveway because I was already had junk cars sitting around.
What's funny is you were only in the property like maybe 2 years, and this
Yeah.
is the peak of the junkiness.
2 years we're already full on salvage yard.
Yeah, the neighborhood's gone down in value considerably.
I'm sure my neighbors were
Not thrilled, yeah.
less than thrilled. So we went on like my birthday and made multiple trips, and we
You
got,
got 3 cars that time.
was it 3 cars that day?
Yeah.
So we got the Mercury.
Nope.
Oh no, we got the Mercury the second trip.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
you got the 239s in the truck. The 239 two-door sedans in the truck on your birthday.
Oh, okay. And then immediately my one buddy Jason came and hung out. And
Yep.
his now wife and Kate went and I don't know, antiquing or something, and we went and did this nonsense, and they came back and we were cutting up. So I instantly started cutting the 32 truck up, like I think on the trailer maybe.
Yep. I think you did the same with the 39 too. You cut it up the same.
No, that sat in the side yard.
Did it?
I remember taking parts off of it for people in
Oh,
the
you're right.
in the side yard. So the stuff ended up just like sitting, and it was just like, oh my god, I was like, what did I get myself into? So the stuff sat. I was overwhelmed. I'm doing this in between my day job, like all this stuff. It was very difficult, but again, this goes back to this idea. Like I probably paid more money than a lot of people would have liked to pay for this stuff because it was so rough. None of them had titles. This was all just bill of sale type deal, and they were all parts cars.
That's another thing we were doing for them. A convenience thing, because some people would not buy a vehicle with it didn't have a title.
Right. So I bought all the cars, and then the other thing was I was doing this to make it easy because I wanted to see what stuff was in the garages.
Yes.
So luckily, I think it was the second time maybe we went back. Or maybe it was the first time. I don't remember. They did open the garages up, and there was a garage that was packed with old speed equipment and race wheels.
Wasn't there a sprint car in there too?
Might have been. I don't remember. There was all kinds of old racing stuff in there. Hillborn, all kinds of stuff. Now it wasn't all flathead. There was a small percentage of it that was flathead. There was a bunch of 70s era, sprint and stock car stuff. So it was pretty cool. So we were able to buy a bunch of the flathead stuff, and yeah, I don't remember what all. It was like a couple sets of heads and some intakes.
I think that might have been when you were there. I don't remember any of that. So it must have been a time you went, either when you bought all the cars, because I wasn't there for that, when you drug all the cars home.
I think it was the day I made the deal.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was the day I made the deal on the stuff and paid them. Was the day that I got that stuff, because I remember putting the stuff in the back seat of my like F-250, and I don't even know if I remember anybody being with me. I might have went by myself to make the deal and pay them, and then we moved all the cars. But because we moved all the cars on like a Saturday or something.
Yeah, it was
like
on a
that.
Saturday. I remember that.
But in the end, I knew that through some hard work, I could get the cars paid off and get the cars I wanted and whatever. So the idea was to, quickly part these cars off. So the double B truck was like terribly rough. All that was good on it was like the firewall
Yep.
and a couple other little odds and ends. Kind of funny, a lot of the 32, a fun fact, the 32 trucks, whether they were big trucks or half tons, they use a lot of 32 car parts on them. So the firewall's the same. There's a bunch of different stuff that's the same. So I kept a few different odds and ends or, pulled them off.
Didn't the grill end up at Jason Moss's? Wasn't it on his wall for a long time?
Maybe, I don't remember.
I could have, maybe not. I can't remember now.
I don't know, but there was a lot of really rough stuff, and we pulled it apart. And then the cars, it was just kind of like the Forgotten Hot Rod was kind of like, I don't know, it's pretty neat. it's the most solid out of them, which was saying a lot. And we started working on that one first just because it was like the most solid. And we pulled that into the shop to work on it. And it was like, we did like 1 or 2 videos. And the one was
So when you pulled the engine out.
my buddy Brett and Brett would come over occasionally to help out. He works at another shop here doing like restoration work. So every now and then he would come over and hang out and help a little bit. So he came over and we pulled the engine out of the thing, and it was like that video, for whatever reason, with all the water coming out of the engine, like did really, really well
I
compared
think it was
to
probably one of our
bigger videos at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Other than the videos pulling them out of the yard. Yeah, those did well. So that video started doing good. I'm like, oh man, I guess we might have to kind of work on this thing. So that's what went down the rabbit hole. But basically getting those cars out of that yard was an ordeal. And the video comments were hilarious on it because people were just like talking crap on the machine operators for moving, how rough they were, quote unquote. And like, you don't realize how stuck this stuff was.
Especially the 39 Mercs. Like,
Yeah.
that was the other 2 came out fairly easy.
Right.
Actually, I think I went with you, if I remember correct. You and I might have went there on a Friday and pulled the cars out.
I think you're right.
And then on Saturday, you went and brought them home.
They just loaded them on the trailer. Yeah, you're right.
I'm pretty sure.
I think you're right because I think one of the guys that was helping did it. They did it during business hours, and I think the owner and Robbie came back on a Saturday after hours to actually load the cars because we had to pull the trailer into the yard, and they have a pretty busy yard, so they didn't want to interrupt.
That's right, because Robbie didn't help us pull. It was that other dude.
Yeah, there was another guy that worked there that was like one of the yard foremen or something.
Yeah.
He actually ran the machine to clear it out and
right,
pull the cars out.
I had a flashback. I remember ripping the door off of the other 39 two-door because it was like dragging on the ground. So we like broke the door off and threw it in the car to get it out of the mud.
You guys are terrible. You're wrecking this old car. I could have been saved.
We cut it up.
Like, you know, if you can just like quickly break the door off the A-pillar, it's probably pretty junk at that point.
Yeah, so you went and got those 3 cars, and then I just looked. That was like the beginning of June, because your birthday's June 1st. Mm-hmm. So it was like end of May, June, we got those cars. And then I just looked in August, we went back roughly and got the Swamp Merc, which was even worse to get out than all the other cars.
Oh, that one was terrible. It was really, really sunk. It was probably in like the wettest portion of the yard, of that backyard. And it was grown up really crazy. I mean, there was like cattails growing.
Yeah, the thumbnail from that is probably the best thumbnail I've ever made. It was so good.
Yeah, it had the little zombie in it.
The swamp monster, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So, so that car, when we were pulling it out, it was so stuck. So,
I do not know how it did not physically just rip in half.
I don't know.
It had to be so close to just tearing the roof in half and just leaving the back half of the car there.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible. And at that, I was not playing it up for the camera. I was like, what did I do?
Yeah.
You know, like, what am I thinking? I was already like and that whole deal probably was the catalyst for me to be like, all right, I need to start buying better stuff. This is like, you know, I know people that like, there's like old guys that they've been buying junk like that for their whole entire lives. And it's like, I only did it for like a handful of years and I was tired of it right away. So that one deal was like, I was just like, man, this is such a pain in the ass. And, you know, so we drug the cars out and they were full. I remember the Swamp Merc was full of hornets.
That was full of bees for a long time.
It had I think every different type of bee that lives in this part of the country
and
had a nest in it.
Like idiots, we dropped it directly in front of the garage doors.
Yeah.
It sat in between the garage doors for like a year plus, I think.
The one thing that I remember was the funniest part of it. And I used to try and go out and like fight the bees. And I was trying to get them like get the nest down. So we'd find a nest, you'd bang on a quarter panel, and they'd hear all the bees go crazy, and you start running out. So Kate was like, the way my property's set up, like my kitchen window looks down into the shop because the shop's like kind of underground and my house is up on the hill. It's above it. So she can like look down and see into the driveway there in front of the, the original shop. So that's where this car was sitting. So it was like a Saturday morning or maybe it was in the evening. I went out to try and fight the bees and I like banged on something, was trying to spray them with bee spray, and then I tripped over something and fell, and then the bees are coming and like stinging me and attacking me. She's looking out the window like washing a dish or something.
Just drinking her morning coffee, enjoying the shit show.
Just laughing at me, and I'm like yelling like an idiot and like and spraying. And so there was like a whole summer of just like every time you got near that thing, there was bees like going after you, and then the bees would fly and make nests in other areas of the property. So every car and trailer had bees in
They're
it.
still, I think those same bees are living in the tractor. Because remember, they're in the ballast box in the back. Whenever you move the tractor, there's a shit ton of bees that come out.
Yeah. So it was just terrible. And they were not, it wasn't like bumblebees. It was hornets and wasps and yellow jackets. And
I remember that sat there because we got those cars in 2019, actually, in that summer of 19. That winter is when we were going to get the Skelly car and the Schroll car. Mm-hmm. And we used the Merc as a test to see if that winch that we got was any good. Because we built like a cradle to put on the back of the truck to winch them. And we tested it by dragging the Swamp Merc because it was the heaviest dead weight we had kicking around the property.
Yeah, we dragged it like 5 feet in the driveway. And we're like, okay, this winch is kick-ass.
Yeah.
So I somehow... Yeah, so the Swamp Merc just sat. And then when we got those cars, that's when the channel started kind of like evolving and changing quickly. So when we did the Schroll estate, because it was just like, for me, I got like two, at that point seemed like unobtainable cars. I got a 32.5 window and I got a 34, so it was like the Swamp Merc very quickly became.
It fell to the bottom of the list quick.
Yeah, so it was like that. And we were working on the 39 Forgotten Hot Rod pretty heavily just because it was doing really well on the channel. So the idea was I was going to get the Forgotten Hot Rod done, and then I would get the Merc in and start working on that next. So I was already gathering parts. Like I bought my friends Patty and Tim. Yeah. Their Patty's father had a large collection of early Ford parts, and I used to buy stuff. So I remember going to them and like, I don't know what I spent, $500 or something. And I bought a nice pair of front fenders for that car and a bunch of stuff for
rear fenders.
Rear fenders.
I remember at one point the pallet rack down in the shop that used to have spare parts on was literally just filled with like sheet metal for that car.
I was buying all kinds of nice parts for the worst Mercury in the planet. So but once we got those other cars, the channel just started evolving. It was pretty obvious I wasn't going to work on that car. And I had lots of plans for it, but then it was just like, well, what am I doing? So very quickly I realized, like, I'm not going to work on this thing.
You did have grand dreams. I remember there's a photo you put on Instagram or Facebook of, like, one of the Barris books that had a 39 Merc. It had the dotted lines with, like, chopped, sectioned, and body dropped. Yeah. Had all, like, the lines where you cut the car. Channeled.
Yeah. I was thinking of doing some kind of, like, wild custom and...
That's a perfect car to start with if you're going to chop it all up into pieces.
It was. So I quickly realized that wasn't the case. Now, a lot of people ask us about what happened with the cars that were in that yard. And I think they have moved a couple, but they haven't really moved many.
All basically still there.
Yeah, I think they cleaned up a little bit of the area where we pulled some cars out. But I think there's still a lot of them are back there. From what I understand, I know one of our friends was able to buy. There was a pretty cool International Harvester cab over that was there that a lot of people had tried to buy, and one of our friends had gotten in there and bought that and drug it out of there, which was probably no easy feat. Now it was near the edge, but it was a big ass truck.
Who bought
that? Jared and Gary from Cabin Fever.
Oh, okay.
Because one day I went to their auction hall to pick up some stuff I wanted at one of their auctions.
It was just sitting there.
It was just sitting there. I'm like, I know that. And they're like, yeah, we finally, and it was the same deal with that thing. Like the owners of the salvage yard, like they're so busy. Like again, another crappy old truck. For them to get around to make the deal, it wasn't their first priority. So they eventually got it. I don't know if they resold it or they actually did anything with it. Don't know. But yeah, sorry, a lot of the vehicles are still there. They're very rough. There was stuff I would like to get out of that yard, but I have a tough time now with the stuff we're buying
To justify,
it. So, and if we did get them, a lot of the vehicles are so rough. I would immediately bring it home and in the same day cut it into a bunch of pieces and part it out and sell it. So there was a neat 35.6 pickup that was there,
Yeah.
but it was like in the center of this mess. It was probably one of the hardest ones to get to.
Actually, it was on the edge because it's almost in the shrub row to the farmer's field. It's like a shrub growing through the middle. When you're there in the summer and everything's green, you can barely see the truck.
Yeah, and it's a 35.6 pickup. The truck is all rotted away and most of it's not very good, but like you look in the cab, all the interior's in it, the dash is in it, a bunch of the 35.6 specific weird pickup cab parts are in it and on it. So like for that it would have been good, but like if you wanted this was not the one you'd want to start with.
No.
Maybe the top of the cab would have been usable, but so again, I would have liked to get that one, but it's dropped down on our priority list, and I haven't been back to bug them.
And there was like 7 or so F100 pickups there as well, right?
Yeah, there's a bunch of F100s there that had good parts on them. Again, they were all kind of rotten. There was the one that the next one we were planning on pulling out was there was an F100 with a tilt nose on it.
So killer.
And I think it had an FE or something in it.
Yeah, it's had some weird for an engine.
It was just a later, it was
Yeah.
like a 70s style truck, but it was kind of cool. It would have been a neat little hauler to build. But again, the channel started evolving and we didn't go back. And the last time I talked to Robbie was this past spring. Steve and I ran the stroll car out of fuel like a mile up the road.
Oh, that's right.
and it was like a mile up the road from the yard. And we broke down in some like old lady's driveway, and she gave this is like typical old. Everything we do is even old school, like even when we break down. So I knocked on the lady's door or whatever, and she took me in her car. Again, I guess I look like a respectable human being.
Surprisingly.
This is when Steve still had long hair, so she didn't trust him.
You got to stay with the car, gentlemen. Creep me out.
So she took me in her car with her little gas can for a lawnmower down to the gas station down the street, which is like basically almost across the street from the yard. And they were changing the pumps and the place was closed. So she was kind of like not very invested. She's like, oh, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'll take you back to my place. So I was like, I think there's a gas station like, she's like, oh, that's 5 miles down the road. She didn't want to go. So I'm like, okay, no problem. So I texted or called Robbie out of the blue. Such a good dude.
And he's no longer a dismantler. He's like an office. He has more of an office job there.
Yeah, I think he's much higher up. He might be like the shop foreman or the yard foreman. I don't know. But he's moved up in the company a handful of years, progressed. And I called him and haven't talked to him in a while. And luckily he picked up. He said, hey, man, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I might be broken down the road. And I just knew that the yard would have old gas laying around because they dismantle cars. He's like, oh, yeah, let me go. I'll grab some fuel. I'll be right down. And he came down and hooked us up. But like that was the closest I've gotten to even going back to that yard. Now, I'm sure if I text him and wanted to come one day and look around, we could.
Yeah.
And I really should probably text him and see what we could do to help them save the cars. But I totally understand the owner's kind of mindset on it. It is a pain in the ass.
Because they pulled a car out and did put it in the field to sell. And it sat there for a while, didn't it?
Yeah, it was
like a 70s Chevy, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it was a Chevelle or a Nova or what it was. I don't remember what it was, but it was sort of interesting, whatever it was. But again, it was pretty rough. And I don't know what would ever happen with that. But like, it's it's a pain in the ass to get rid of this stuff. Now, I think the best way probably to do it, in my opinion, they have the machines, is if they just spent a couple days, drug everything out, put it in the open somewhere, and just had an auction.
Yep.
and the stuff would just go. The hardest part with that stuff was it was all so sunken in. You wouldn't want to have an auction where the cars were sitting because people would take forever to get them out because they wouldn't be able to grab them as easily. So I think, but again, I think when they need the space, they'll probably deal with it. But there was I remember in the one real far back corner, there was a dually, like a C30.
Right. Yeah, like a 70s dually, yeah.
Dually that was pretty cool, but again, I don't know how rough it was.
I think it was a four-door,
yeah, it was a
gigantic
dually,
truck.
Yeah, it was a four-door dually, like C20
and
or
it didn't,
C30.
and it wasn't there long enough to look like it was. It wasn't sunken in the mud yet. It was still decent.
And it was in the back left corner of the yard, so I don't know. I don't really know. Like, I don't know if they put that in from the farmer's field side because it was hard to get to now.
Yeah.
But there was some pretty neat stuff that was still in there. There was that Mustang with the crushed roof.
Oh, yeah.
That was like a fastback Mustang.
Yeah.
And we had a ton of people bothering us about, like, they wanted to buy the...
There was a ton of us bothering us from that video of some of the most random stuff in that yard.
There was one of those... I wish Steve was here to remember the name of... There was like a Chevy, like the heavy Chevy.
Heavy Chevy. It was a Chevelle that had a... shit, I can't remember. It's something with the engine,
It was
I
a
think.
big block or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was like some interesting cars, and that's why the owner obviously put these back there because all the cars were... Most of the vehicles were unique and kind of interesting. There was a 41 or 46.8 pickup that had a different engine in it. It was, looked like it was kind of cool. So all those cars at one point were pretty neat and unique vehicles, but now they're pretty far gone.
And does your brother still have the 41?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the 41. By the time we finally drug all the cars out of there.
Which is funny. That car we thought was going to be fairly easy to get out of there because it was like sitting. If you drive basically up the driveway past the house that the property is on, the 41 is like the first car you would see. The way it was like parked sideways, kind of to block people from going back into the junkyard. And that was probably one of the harder ones to physically get out because they sunk their forklift all but to the chassis.
Yes.
Like they had this humongous, almost kind of like the big red forklift we had, and they all but buried it into the mud.
Yeah. Did we try to get it one day and then we gave up and then we came back another day because they sunk it?
I don't know if, were you there when they were trying to do it? I think you just went over to film pulling it out, and they
were just like, yeah, this isn't happening today. We got to wait till it's drier.
Yeah.
And then we eventually, they did drag it out. But yeah, that one was rough, and I just wanted that for parts, and that was just another one of those deals. I was just buying a vehicle that I thought I could part out to help them and help spend enough money that was worth their time. My brother does still have I don't know why my brother kind of took a liking to it. And he's like, oh, I want to build.
It's a 4-door, right?
Yeah. He's like, I want to build like a ratty old car, but he wanted to put it on a modern like chassis he had or whatever. And it's still sitting at his place. I think I went over there this summer and looked at it, and it was like, oof, it's pretty bad. But it's actually got some parts on it that I could use. But my brother is a hoarder like myself. Well, worse. He's a worse hoarder than I am because he's in the woods. So like he doesn't want to get rid of it or get rid of any parts off of it, and he has ideas of grandeur of.
You got to tell Evan that you should start working on it for his YouTube channel.
Then I'm gonna have to get involved.
Yeah, I know.
I'm gonna have to get involved no matter what. But it's a fun one to save. Everything's there on the car, and the agreement I had with my brother was basically like he paid whatever I paid for it. I forget, or maybe it was $1,000 or $750 or so. I forget. But and the agreement was the stuff he doesn't use off of the car he would just give to me. So it had. The trans was in it and the rear.
Basically the whole chassis because he wasn't going to use any of it.
And any of that stuff. So, but it stinks because it's got like okay 41 bumpers on it, and it's got that rare overrider
license
plate mount. When I went the other week, like with my father after Hershey, I dropped him off at my brother's house, pick up his car, and I was just walking around the car looking at it. I'm like, oh my God, we just sold one of those. It has like this, kind of rare mount on it, and like the bumpers are there. there's a bunch of 41 specific stuff that's actually decent on it. I haven't looked at the car in 4 years
And our
or 5
viewpoint
years.
on those cars, not viewpoint, but knowledge of parts off those cars has evolved greatly
Yeah.
in the last handful of years. So you're looking at it, and you're like, all this good stuff that's just sitting here doing
Right.
nothing.
And out of all those cars, before we wrap it up, I'll kind of go what happened with all the cars.
I was going to ask you that before we wrapped up.
Yeah, so we parted out the 39 two-door sedan. I basically bought that because it was the identical car to the Forgotten Hot Rod.
Yeah, deluxe.
So I ended up borrowing a bunch of parts off of it that were missing off of the Forgotten Hot Rod. I was able to steal off that car. I parted the rest of the car out, cut it up, and we scrapped what wasn't usable, and a bunch of the parts got sold and went on to be used. The 32 big truck, like I mentioned, we cut that all up, sold a few parts off of it, and it went. Let me think, what else did we
Swamp
do?
Merc.
Swamp Merc, we ended up selling. So I finally got tired of that thing sitting in the center of the driveway. We loaded it up on my old car trailer that had like a cracked frame.
Yep.
And backed it into the side of the yard so it was at least like contained.
And it also blocked all the other junk.
Yeah, and it was kind of a blocker for that. That sat for a while on the trailer, and then finally I listed the car for sale on Facebook Marketplace for cheap.
That was right when we got this, wasn't it?
I think it was right before, or we knew we were getting it, and I wanted to clean up the property. So, because we got this. We got this right after the
34s. We got this in like August. This is the very first day of work for me as an
that's right.
IronTrap employee, quote unquote.
But yeah, so I think I knew I was going to be doing that 34 deal, and then I knew we had this Merc I also had kind of bought, and I was like, I got to clean up the yard and the property because I got all these cars kind of like
That's
coming.
true. You might have sold it before we even bought this.
I think I did because I think I was working on the 34 deal, and I was like, man, I got to clean up because if I get like 5 or 6 34s in one shot,
Yeah.
like, where am I putting them? So I put an ad up on Facebook. A gentleman from Virginia that is a collector of early Fords, really nice guy. He's got like a F-ton of early Fords. Really nice
We're
guy.
like an hour in, you can curse. It's okay.
Fuck ton of
Yeah.
early Fords. He's a
He's a hoarder.
He's a hoarder, self-proclaimed. Nice guy, very private person. But he was just buying old Fords, Mercury, Lincolns, just for fun. He had a excess of money, and if he thought the car looked cool, he would just buy it and just set it out in the yard, set it in a shed, whatever reason. He didn't really know who we were. I shouldn't say this. He had watched our channel, but he already had agreed to buy the car from me before he knew like who I was or what we were, what it was. And he's like, I just think it's neat. I don't know. I just buy cars like every weekend. So me and my buddy just run around and buy old cars off Facebook and whatever. So he came and bought the car. It was a nightmare. We backed the trailers together and drug it across onto his trailer. It was a pain in the ass. I was so happy when that thing left.
And surprisingly, I sold the trailer that it was sitting on as well.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that Mike sold the trailer, but
Literally broke it in half. The one frame rail was totally not connected to anything.
And but yeah, when that thing left, that was one of the that and the forklift were the two things I've never been so happy to see leave my property because they were both just so junky and heavy and big. So those two things were great. The trailer too.
Yep.
But when that left, I was like, thank goodness. So I think he still has it. I think it's just sitting in his collection of old stuff. So maybe someday it'll be found again. And
This is that famous Swamp Merc that was on IronTrap on YouTube.
and it's terrible.
Just looks even just as bad.
So that happened. That one got sold. I think he still has it, I believe. My brother got the 41, still has it sitting around. And then the 39 Forgotten Hot Rod ended up being the one that became a well-known car. Didn't think it was going to happen. So we put the car together. There's a long series on it. If you want the Cliff Notes, there is a time-lapse video of redoing that car that's like it's 6 million views
Yeah.
or something
That
now.
is now our most. The Swamp Merc video was our most popular for years, and then we put that one out, and it's just
Went
uphill.
crazy. It
Yeah.
still gets video, views and comments every day. We see it getting a lot of views and comments. And built that car, drove it around for a while. It was just like our beat around hot rod. It was cool. And then we needed to make room a couple years ago now.
Yeah.
And I put it on eBay. We put it up for sale. Nobody really serious jumped on it. So I was like, screw it. I'm going to put it up for bid on eBay and see what happens. So I let it ride. And it sold on eBay. Freiberger ended up buying it.
Yes.
We know that Roadkill did a...
And Freiberger didn't. We didn't sell it to Roadkill. Freiberger just put a bid on it and didn't even realize he won it until after the auction ended. He just put a price and was like, it's going to go for more, and then forgot about it for 7 days.
Yeah, and Freiberger, for a little bit of a background, I don't know if we ever talked about it on the channel, he had put a post up a year before looking for a 39 or 40 coupe to drive or have or whatever, much like a lot of us, he just buys cars for fun of it and gets it out of his system. So everybody hit him up on social media. You need to buy the IronTrap car. You got to check it out, blah, blah, blah. He actually DM'd me and was like, hey, everybody tells me I should buy this car. What's the deal? And I told him about the car, and I kind of politely said I didn't want to sell it to him, just because I thought it wasn't the right car for him or what he wanted to do. Now, why? I don't even know why I did that, because of anybody that can handle themselves with an old car, he certainly could. I think I was more trying to save face, that I didn't want him to buy the car expecting to drive it around LA and the highway, because he kind of made it seem like he wanted to like commute in it to the Motor Trend offices or whatever, just use it in LA. And I'm like, man, I don't know if this is the car for you for that, because it's all like everything's old. It's still got a banjo rear with 378s. And that wasn't a disrespect to him, like he couldn't handle the car. I didn't want him to be disappointed, and he's kind of high profile and have it look bad on us. So I kind of like just said, it's not really for sale. So when he won it, not to be a dick, but I kind of like messaged him like, you're not going to fucking turn this into some like three-wheeled...
We're going to take the front half of another 39, weld it to the back of this one, and we're going to drive it from both ends.
Cross country.
Yeah.
With two blown Hemis in it,
Yes.
or whatever, just wacky stuff. And he's like, no, like I just wanted it. I thought it'd be neat. I didn't even think I was going to buy it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And then he's like, well, can I just store it at your shop for like through the winter? And then when we figure out what we're going to do with it, I might do an episode on it. I was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, can I just store it at your shop and we'll come get it? Now, most people would be like thrilled to death, have your garage, Freiberger and Finnegan come to your shop. Like, in the car world, that's like the, your celebrity.
As good as it gets.
Yeah, that's like a big deal. And I don't know, working in Eastwood and being in the industry for a while, they're just dudes. Like, they don't remember me, Freiberger or Finnegan, but like I met them a bunch of times years ago when I worked for Eastwood. They're just dudes. They're just cool car guys. So to me, it wasn't like that big of a deal. So I was like, but it goes back to the same. I said, like I would tell anybody, it didn't matter if it was him or anyone else. So the only reason I'm selling this car is because I need space.
Yeah.
So if I let you store this car in my garage for 6 months or a year, I still don't have the fucking space. So you need to get the shit out of my garage, essentially is the nice way I put it. He's like, all right, well, I think Angelo lives like near you. And I said, yeah, I know Tony. He's like 30 minutes away, his shop, whatever. And he's like, all right, let me see if Tony can like store it. So then Tony was going to store the car for a minute. And he was texting me like, hey, I got to go get this piece of junk. Does it drive? Like, you could totally drive it back to your shop. And then that, I guess, fell through. And then they ended up having it shipped to Finnegan's shop. And then they did the drive from there. So, yes, it would have been super cool if they came here, did the handoff. They drove it to, whatever they were doing with it. But I just didn't have the space. I'm also not trying, like, my goal isn't to get famous. So I didn't give a shit if I was on a Roadkill episode or not. I just was happy to see the car leave.
If you haven't seen the Roadkill episode,
I've never watched it.
they didn't make us look like a bunch of dumbasses.
Oh, you did watch it?
I watched it. Their biggest gripe is the seat wasn't fully bolted down, which I'm not sure what happened with that. I thought it was. We've ridden in it a ton of times.
I don't really know, but somehow something didn't get. We did get the interior done very shortly before I sold it. So I don't know if when we put the seat back in, something they bolted. I don't even know. They had taken the seats all apart to reupholster them. Maybe there was something was missing, and they told me, and the upholsterer told me, and I forgot. I take full blame for it because in the end of the day, I probably should have checked it, but that was the only thing anybody told me about.
It wasn't anything we did, but a voltage regulator welded itself shut and caught the generator on fire.
Oh, yeah. Freiberger, I knew he was doing this road trip because he told me they were doing an episode. They were going to be driving it somewhere. I don't really remember if he told me where that they were driving or where they were going. He calls me. He's like, so it was the most like nonchalant way of saying, he's like, so we just pulled into our hotel a few minutes ago, and the generator was on fire on this car. And I'm like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, the generator was on fire.
But those dudes have done so many road trips in the sketchiest pieces of shit that catch on fire and do silly stuff like that. So it's just like a normal Tuesday for them.
And I respect that because I kind of would have been the same way with me. I'm like, so we got a problem.
The fire's out, but it was on fire for a couple minutes.
And I'm like, oh God. And he's like, yeah, so is this like obscure, hard to find, like nostalgic shit that I can't get? I was like, no. Luckily, this car, just go to Napa. Usually they have it in stock, or within a day you can have a brand new generator. You can get a voltage regulator. That's why we use that stuff. Should be able to get. I was like, it's all brand new stuff from Napa. I don't really know what happened. That's totally weird. And I think he texted me like the next day and was like, yeah, we're on the road. All was good. So, but I was not like, anybody should know when we sell a car, I don't sugarcoat it. So like when we sold that thing, that's why I gave it, like, the only thing I know that people told me about in the show that they thought was funny was, like, I wrote a letter.
Yeah.
Like, again, old school method. Like, I was selling the car. He wasn't coming to pick it up. And I do this with, like, a lot of cars I sell. If the actual owner isn't going to be here to buy it, I, like, write a letter and say, tap the gas twice and jiggle the handle. And
here's a secret handshake on all the quirks.
If you do all these steps, the car will start perfect. If you don't do this, it's a pain in the ass. So also me knowing that they're doing a roadkill with it, I was like, man, we're going to look like assholes if the thing won't start.
Yeah.
So I showed him. So I wrote all the stuff down, and, I guess it started right away. Again, I didn't watch the episode. But the thing, if it sat for a while, the carburetor with that teapot carburetor, that the fuel evaporates out of them easily when they sit because of the design. So I was like, wrote a whole letter about that and blah, 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 and all this different stuff. And I guess a lot of people have come up to us at events, have mentioned that letter and how they thought it was funny. And I'm like, I do that on like most of the cars I sell if it's going overseas or going to somebody they can't pick it up. Because I've bought so many cars where it's like if they would have told me the secret handshake, it would have made it more enjoyable.
The best example is the tractor.
Oh, yeah.
The tractor has a very confusing handshake to start it. And literally when we bought it, it took us forever.
And the guy kind of showed me, but I didn't really know.
We couldn't get it off the trailer. It was and for probably a year, it took you a while to get like the secret handshake and the different weather conditions to get it to start and run. There's multiple times we've been trying to unload shit, and you're like, the tractor won't start. We'll fucking do it tomorrow. Storm off all pissed off.
Now I got the technique down.
Yeah, now it starts every time.
So I try and do that on a lot, but they bought the car. Yes, we know that there's a roadkill episode. Yes, I know that Freiberger bought the car because I sold him the goddamn car. So yes, we know all that. He has the car. He had the car. And he basically, they did an episode on it, and then even after them teasing about the car on social media, a gentleman bought the car from him, who apparently owns a handful of roadkill cars. So I think he's like a fan, and he collects roadkill cars. So he bought the car, hit me up, asking me all questions about it.
He's in Arizona, I think.
I think so. But it's kind of crazy how these cars come from a junkyard or salvage yard down the street to
An international superstar.
To being like a well-known car that was on roadkill, and they drove it through
Monsoon.
a monsoon and through
Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras. Like that stuff to me is totally insane. Like that car we found in a swamp, like, so that stuff's really cool. I like seeing where in these cars that we find the full circle of them. So some of them got cut up, but at least that one got saved. Will probably always be, now with the different stages of this car since we found it, like that car's set. No, now that it was on roadkill, like that car is always going to be kept.
Yeah,
in
no
good
one
care.
cares that it was on IronTrap Garage.
No,
the roadkill thing is
roadkill car.
provenance.
But that car will be taken care of forever.
Yep.
And it's very cool that's the thing. And that crappy old 39 is now running around being cared for even more. And that's the goal in the end of the day when we're selling it. Pass it on to the next person that's going to hold on to it and take care of it. And that's all we could ask for. So,
Yep.
so that's basically a background on all those different cars. That's our little silver lining is, one of the cars made it and actually is getting loved and used and is cool again. And maybe someday we'll see that car again.
Yeah, maybe we'll go back to that junkyard and buy some more stuff too.
We don't know.
Salvage yard. Sorry, I keep saying junkyard.
Yeah.
Salvage yard.
There you go. So thank you guys for watching, listening, following along. It's super fun. If you haven't, go back and revisit the 39 Forgotten Hot Rod videos, the build videos if you're ever bored. Because it is a monumental amount of work to put that car back on the road. And I had a ton of help from a bunch of friends. It's interesting watching those videos and see all our different friends that maybe don't live here now or life got in the way and we don't see them as often and they were helping. That was a cool time in the channel because there was a lot of friends coming and helping.
A lot of those videos were filmed on like weeknights and weekends.
Yep.
So you'll see a lot of different people popping in because the Sunday service has always been a thing.
Yep.
But there was a lot more work getting done on Sundays because we were all working normal jobs. So Sundays we would come and just work in the shop.
Yeah. So that was a good time.
It was a good time.
Thank you guys for following. Appreciate it. Make sure if you're listening on the audio version, subscribe, give us a review. That's very helpful because we are able to get some more reach by doing that, and we'll continue to do these. If you have an idea or if there's a video or a story that you'd like to hear like we've been doing, or you want to know the background behind a video or whatever, drop us an email, irontrapgarage@gmail.com, and we will take a look, and maybe we will do a little storytelling.
Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube, like Matt mentioned in the beginning, we're doing audio podcasts every week. So if you've only been watching YouTube, there's probably 6 or so that we've done that are audio only. Mm-hmm. Go back and take a listen.
Yeah, you'll enjoy it.
Yep.
Something to listen to while you're in the garage or driving and hear us ramble on and maybe hear Moon fart or snore.
Yep.
Which he's currently snoring.
I'm not snoring, man. Leave me alone.
Yeah, so thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Catch you later.
Catch you later.